We're gonna put a Fusion in a TRX4 Sport. That's right, it is install time. I got a fresh Fusion 1800 and a fairly fresh TRX Sport. This is the Traxxas TRX standard RTR rig, I guess the lower cost one than the regular TRX4. So this is doesn't have the 2-speed transmission, doesn't have the unlocking disc, but still has the same basic drivetrain and the rest of that. So it's a very cool truck. It came with some sweet Proline Hyraxes and some upgraded beadlock wheels on there already. A friend of mine, we had a bunch of stuff that he didn't have space for or needed to make some room, and versus dealing with selling it off used or whatever, he's like, here, take it, go have some fun with it. So shout out to Mr. Dobson, thanks buddy. Fresh truck. So I'm gonna pull this system out, we'll install this one, set it up, do all the changes, and talk about all the programming options as well. First things first, out with the old motor. So TRX has a lot of hidden wires. I haven't done this in a minute. This might take some doing. And then we're gonna have to get into the receiver box as well to unplug that. And then steering is 1, throttle is 2. On the Traxxas receivers, be careful. There's 2 number 1s. When you go to hook this all back up, you gotta pay attention. Zip tie? Oh, another zip tie. Careful not to cut the wire. All right, it's out. Look at that monster pinion. It's like a 17, it says on there. I think we're just gonna put that on the Fusion because the 1800 should be all right. And this guy's got a single speed in it, so I think it's a ratio that's in between the other 2 gears of the normal TRX4 that I have. So this, like I said, 1800 Fusion, this is a 2-in-1, so the motor has the speed control built into the end of it. It's a 540 size motor, but because the speed control is on the end of it, it's about the length of a 550 motor. I'll show you here in a second. And you see this? This is why you guys never get damaged boxes, because they send them to me instead. So inside, you have your fresh Fusion. We're gonna slide the plastic slider out. There's also the programming box for making setting changes. We're gonna set that all aside, talk about all that stuff later. You get some stickers, your best friend in the whole wide world, the instruction manual. Gotta poke these guys through the little hole carefully. So, this guy is the motor. You got your battery leads here. This is your receiver wire, and then your on-off switch, and then the programmer plugs in through that rubber sealed end on there. But very cool setup. Hold it up to the other motor. Let's see exactly. It is, put it right on the motor plate, just a little bit longer. I'd say 2-3 millimeters longer. I'm all metric now. I'm sorry, folks. And then we're gonna need to retain this plate, and because we're using the same gear, I'm gonna pay attention to what letter it's on. It's on C, the 3rd one from either end. Sometimes these things are awesome, the motor mounts that keep everything so you don't have to set the mesh, but there is some room for wiggle in there, so don't just set it and forget it. You want to, when you install it, make sure that the gear mesh is sort of okay. Listen to it, and then if it's not, kind of wiggle on the motor plate a little bit so that you get some I don't know, lash. Sometimes they'll just sit in there where they're way too tight. All right, so same spots, that's gonna sit there. Let's get the pinion gear out so we can align that. Just gonna set this in here. Now it's gotta be straight up and down, otherwise you're not gonna know where stuff goes. And that's gonna go like that, kind of flush with the end. Because the motor shaft setup is slightly different. This one's not out of a drill. All right, and what I'm checking is to make sure that it's not too far one way or the other. And that's pretty much all there is for that. I'm gonna double check the set screw because it's always sweet when your set screw comes loose. And I'm gonna give these guys one more little, just in case. Or forgot to mention is if you're doing motor swaps in general, check your motor screws, they aren't super long. There's some cars that have very long motor screws and those will dig inside your motor and you gotta keep an eye out for that. These are fairly short, so it's okay. All right, so motor cover or gear cover goes back on and then kinda, I like to push it, like lean on it that way. as I put it down, just to give it more gear mesh than less. The thing that I've run into most often is that it's too tight, not too loose. So you'll hear it on trail. Somebody's rig is just like sounding terrible. I like to use the torque thing so it makes it feel like you're using an impact. No, it's not long enough? Lame. Alright, so solvable problem. What I did with my other rig is I flipped this guy around so that it plugged into the front. There are some extra items that come along with your Fusion. It comes with this really nice servo extension. I think it might be a repositioning of some holes because it doesn't line up perfect. Oh yes, it does. Wunderbar. Well, it's still kind of wedged in there, but it's not as bad. I think what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna slide it back a couple millimeters. So you can take a pair of calipers, and let's see, let's do 3 millimeters. And it's making a very, very little light line there that maybe doesn't show up on the camera, but I can see it. It just gives me a place to tag the hole. Right there. Oh. This is super precise work. Oh gosh. So to give ourselves some wiggle room, give it one of those. I know. The cringing is probably real right now, but man, that's kind of the beauty of RC cars. It doesn't have to be ultra precise. Oh, look at that. It even fits. So just to look at that, it's basically moved back. Like, can you see this? Just the distance of the head of the screw almost. So it's a 3 millimeter shift. 2 quick little holes, and we're good to go. So there's 2 channel 1s, don't forget. I say it all the time because I get a lot of calls about my steering makes my throttle go. And then the speed control goes in channel number 2. Always. 1 is for steering, 2 is for throttle. I mean, the nice thing about this plastic, you can make those holes with an X-Acto knife if you needed to, or without using a drill. Make sure you got your rubber seal in there. The higher you can get this part of the antenna, the better your truck works underwater. It's another pro tip. Now, usually, before you button everything up, you want to check it all. Make sure you plug things in right. Otherwise, what usually happens to me is I have to take it all apart again to figure out what I did. All right, so this is a 3-cell, 5200 milliamp, huge mamma jamma of a battery pack for hours and hours of drive time. So you have it installed, and a lot of times folks like to jump right to getting their programmer out because it makes sense to program the speed control. You need the programmer, but calibration has to come first, and that's when you set the speed control to the throttle outputs of the radio. So pretty straightforward with the Fusion. You turn it on and hold it, it'll beep at you, and then you do some stuff. And make sure that we can all see this. So here we go. This is calibration process. After the install, the real step number 1 is to calibrate your speed control. You hold it, it lights up and starts to blink. You let go, it beeps. 1 tap, full throttle. 1 tap, full reverse. 1 tap, and then you're done. And it beeps once, twice, 3 times, and then it finishes up at the end, and then you get operation. So now, because when I give it throttle, it goes backwards, and when I give it reverse, it goes forwards. That is because of the motor being set to counterclockwise rotation. So we're gonna get the programmer out and change that. So the programmer is pretty straightforward. The one that comes with it has all of the settings correct for the speed control, and this same programmer can be used on any QuicRun speed control. You just can't reference the instruction manual here. You have to look at the paper manual for the speed control that you have. So these LED cards are all pretty much the same. It's just the display for the brains that are inside there. On the top here, there's what most is left and right connector. You use the right connector, and it's got a squiggly and a plus and a minus. The squiggly thing is for white. And then on the end of the plug, there is a programming port as well. Remove the little rubber thing, and then the black wires are opposite is the way that it's easiest to remember. So the black wire for the programmer goes over here, the black wire for the switch is on that side. So that, you can see that there. All right, and so when you turn this on, you get white, or you get lines, and then you get numbers, and that goes through these settings. Setting number 1 is RPM and throttle matching. You want to leave that enabled because that's what makes it an F.O.C system. If you like the way a brushed setup feels where it's got that little bit of stall, you would disable setting number 1. You cycle through by pushing item. That'll move us down to number 2. LiPo cells. This is so you can set it to specifically 2 cells or 3 cells or whatever the case may be. I'm only going to run this speed control on 3 cells, so I'm going to set that to 3 cells. You change it and then you hit OK to save. And you go to the next item, which is the cutoff voltage. It starts out on intermediate, which is about 3.5, maybe 3.6 per cell, depending. And I like to run my batteries all the way down. So I'm going to change this to setting number 1 for max run, or no, setting number 2. Sorry, 1 disables it, 2 is low, which is about 3.3 per cell, which is still pretty safe. Hit OK to save. And then you go to thermal protection. I definitely want to leave that on. I leave it low. And then the number 5 is the rotation. That's what we really came in here to do. So you change that to number 2. Hit OK to save, and that swaps the direction of the motor. Don't do it in the radio or whatever, you know, always just do it with the settings of the speed control when you can. Number 6 is your BEC voltage. This all has standard servos, so I'm going to leave it at 6 volts, but it can be set to 7.4 volts as well if you have HV servos. Next up is setting number 7. That is the drag brake force. That's how strong your drag brakes are. You can leave this alone for the most part. Everybody usually in the rock crawler likes nice strong brakes. I like to turn mine down a little bit just to soften things up. This is a very light rig, so it doesn't need a ton of drag brakes. So oops, hit the wrong button. Go back to 7. And then I want to change the value. And just set that down to number 4, 1 setting lower. Hit save. Next one up is your drag brake rate. This one is how quick it applies the drag brakes. So if you want it to snap onto the brakes real hard, you turn that up. If you want it to just gently apply the drag brakes, you turn that down low. For the Fusion, I run these turned all the way down because it doesn't have the auto mode like the Axe does, but level 1 is nice and slow all the time. And when you're going slow, it can apply the brakes slow anyway. When you're going fast, it applies the brakes slow also, which is nice. So this one I'm going to change value to number 1. Hit OK. And then setting number 9 is your reverse force. This is defaulted to 100%, which is usually fine. This way, if you have to panic reverse out of things, you got all your wheel speed there. And that covers it. Only 9 settings to worry about. We're back to number 1 after that. Once you've made all your setting changes, you just turn that off, unplug it from here, put the little doohickey back in there. It's important, don't forget the rubber doohickey. Fire this back up and make sure that it goes the right direction. So now forward's forward, or here. Forward is forward. Reverse is reverse. And everything is gravy. So there it is, quick and easy install. If you do run into any problems with that calibration process, check out the link in the description. We have a how to do what I call the servo test. A lot of times that problem stems from throttle channels not working. And if a throttle channel can't make a servo do its thing, then it's also going to give you problems calibrating your speed control or providing normal operation. So, pro tip. Thanks for tuning in. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, please shoot us an email, northamerica@hobbywing.com. Thanks a lot, everybody. There are some extra items that come along with your Fusion. It comes with this really nice servo extension.